A great Sakipandita said that one must never stop learning, even if one is certain to die tomorrow. So I come from a culture and a tradition that really cherishes the life of learning. So I'm so honored and thrilled to be in one of the most important learning centers in America. And I have to thank all the faculties and the department here for making this happen. So this is a very big subject, and we don't have much time. I'd like to point out that whatever I'm saying, I'm not addressing this to scientists. I will give you my reasons, few of my reasons why I have no no intention to talk with the scientist, and I also believe that at the moment there is no mutual ground where scientists and Buddhists can talk. But there is effort here and there dedicated for dialogue between Buddhists and scientists, and I rejoice. If something Buddha said took Einstein 2,500 years later to say the exactly same thing what Buddha said, I think scientists will end up saying the same thing. This, as a Buddhist, I will say this. So I'm actually addressing this to people who think they are Buddhist, but they may have not, because they are sort of excited by some quotes like Einstein said, in the future, Buddhism will be compatible with science. They get excited by things like this. And of course, science has a lot of authority, especially in this day and age. So I can understand why there are people who think they are Buddhist, but they have not really given up, or not given up is maybe not the right word, but they are basically materialist. Also, maybe Buddhist who thinks they are Buddhist, but they are actually, by consequences, they are none other than Charvaka. There's a school in the past in India called Charvaka, which does not believe in cause, condition, to the certain extent, therefore no reincarnation. There are also Buddhists who think they are Buddhist, but they may have not yet given up entirely some of the Abrahamic residual. And to this, maybe we can have some sort of at least an opening of a dialogue. Even though I made some note, it's not going to be very orderly, so it's going to be chaotic. And I have to also warn you, unlike many of our other teachings, this is going to be a little dry and intellectual. You know, some people get excited, I think, when you look at a system that rejects Creator God. they also get excited by looking at, to the certain extent, understanding a little bit about Buddhist concept of cause, condition, and effect. I'm talking about this Buddhist that I'm addressing to. Okay, those who got excited about, oh, they don't believe in God. Oh, they believe in cause and condition. Sort of a cause to get excited. And then also, there are a few other things like meditation. It's always good, you know. Meditation is always nothing really drastically can go wrong if you talk about just some meditation. And then, of course, non-violence. Of course, you can sell this easily. But this alone is not going to make a complete path of the Buddha Dharma. Forget not believing in God, believing in cause, condition, and effect. Even understanding of emptiness, not necessarily complete the Buddhist path. One of the most important elements of Buddhism is, in Tibetan we call it Sungjuk. I think loosely you can say union, understanding of sort of the philosophy or the reality of union. I'm not talking about tantric sex. I'm talking about the union of wisdom and method, union of relative truth and ultimate truth, union of emptiness and clarity, union of samsara and nirvana. In order to really appreciate Buddha Dharma in its depth, you have to understand this a little bit. And I will explain this later. This is why, this is one of the reasons cannot really have a dialogue with a materialist. Because the concept of union, I don't think exists with a materialist, especially union of matter and mind. Okay, as I said, I'm going to, the order is all, everywhere. Another reason why can't really have a dialogue with the materialist is the way Buddhists validate things. To validate something as true or not true. The Buddhists have several ways to validate. Validating the truth through what we call ngunsum tsema. It's like a direct cognition, inferential logic, and analogy, and words of the Buddha. Now, of course, the words of the Buddha is useless for talking with a materialist. Totally understandable. Although, I have to say this right now before I forget. There are ontologists like Richard Dixie who believes that something exists before the knower. I don't know, like 1 billion years ago, so on and so forth. Something exists before a knower. And no matter how much I hear, how much I listen, all I hear is an assumption. And so, therefore, it is a statement of a scientist. I'm talking about Lung Tsema. So, for me, might as well trust words of the Buddha than a word of a scientist, since both of them are assumption anyway, and I would prefer the Buddha's assumption. Words of the Buddha, yes. I will not bring. Analogy also useless, I think. Inferential logic, to the certain extent, maybe we can discuss. Now, direct cognition, there are few things that we can discuss, like actual direct cognition using your senses, like eyes, ears, etc. But the Buddhists talk about direct cognition of Nanjurungsum, is called yogi's direct cognition. And this is something that we cannot talk with the scientists. No ground. Especially if you talk about Tantric Buddhism, they talk about a wisdom that is not mind. Then it gets even more complicated. For this reason, you know, there has been all this experiment of monks, you know, wearing all this stuff that they put on their head, and then, oh, the meditators are different, whatever. What do you call this? Sort of, yeah, all that experiment. People like Mr. Tinle Norbu and Mr. Sanjay Dorje will laugh at this. Because anything that is detectable, these people don't trust. Another thing, this is of course subject to discussion. Scientists don't seem to have mind. I'm not talking about, you know, sort of literally, I'm talking about, they don't seem to have a concept of mind that Buddhists talk about. So there's no mutual ground. Mind's definition, what is mind? Sort of the identity of the mind. These are not mutually agreed upon with the scientists. I don't know. I'm also learning. I really want this to be sort of the beginning of a dialogue, a little bit of thinking. So there's this question. What is it? Is there Buddhism without reincarnation? Thank you for bringing up this. It's a very important question. It's so important to discuss. It's a very difficult and tricky question. Many reasons. One is language. Reincarnation in English, I looked up at the dictionary, and it says rebirth of a soul in a new body. Then immediately I had to ask, what's the definition of soul? Again in the dictionary. Spiritual or immaterial part of a human being or an animal regarded as immortal. With this definition, we have a problem. But you know, English language, I find, is very rich. The other definition of reincarnation is new version of something of the past. Kind of nice, that one. That resonates, the Tibetan word yang si. Also, the soul, another definition of the soul is essence or embodiment of a specified quality. Not bad for me. But of course, you know, the words, even though it is defined in the dictionary, most authoritative dictionary, doesn't mean much because different people will use with a different background of habit and culture and tradition. So it's worthwhile to really sit down and talk about these definitions. This is where I always think Western academic world really will really protect Buddha Dharma in the future. For instance, you know, Charvaka, this school in India who does not believe in, you know, past life, future life, all that, sadly, whole discussion between the Charvaka and the other school, very few is found. Because in India, culturally, anyone who does not believe in reincarnation are bad. So there is not many liturgy. The great scholar, Indian scholar, present scholar, Amartya Sen said that Charvaka actually probably may have done so much contribution to the Indian system of thinking. And I agree this. Like when we study Buddhist philosophy, pages after pages, argument between Chittamata school and the Madhyamika school. Half a page, dialogue between Charvaka and the Buddhists. Very sad. Culture have somehow, as much as it has contributed to a system like Buddha Dharma, it has also distorted Buddha Dharma in many different ways. I believe that some of the modern Buddhists having a hard time understanding the reincarnation has got a lot to do with this Tibetan system of Tulku, like me. You understand? And Tulku system, yes, is one of the culprit, sort of distorting the idea of reincarnation. It didn't help. Going back to union, to unite wisdom and method, relative truth and ultimate truth, absolutely important for the Buddhist path. And we will talk about the sort of the idea of two truths a little bit later if we have time. Okay, to use the, sort of more commonly found language. Emptiness, the wisdom, and burning an incense, uniting this, absolutely important. This is why you will find masters teach about Hat Sutra in the morning, where forget reincarnation, even enlightenment does not exist. What is reincarnation? It's nothing. Even enlightenment does not exist. But in the afternoon, you will find this master diligently, meticulously, very fussy with the incense, the lamp, reincarnation, so on and so forth. This is another way the Buddhists approach. A little different from materialist, I would say. So what I'm saying is, in order to talk about reincarnation and karma, you have no choice, but you have to talk about emptiness, shunyata. If you separate these two, you cannot talk. But this is difficult. Even to have a glimpse of understanding, forget realization, understanding of shunyata is difficult. Because the moment we talk about emptiness, we slip in thinking we are talking about non-existence. It's really difficult to think in terms of, okay, when we talk about shunyata, it's difficult to think in terms of, he's also talking about non-existence of non-existence. This is difficult. And you will find in most of the Indian philosophy, and especially Buddhists, every time we study, non-existence of something easier. But when we talk about non-existence of a non-existence, it's always difficult to understand and study. In relation to this, body and mind. First of all, the definition of the body and the mind between materialist and the Buddhists, I think, are different. This is important now. I know there's so many things that are quite important. I don't know which one we should be discussing first. if you read sutras or shastras, at glance, you will feel that the Buddha talks about mind and the body as a separate entity. But in many Buddha's teachings, sutras, distinctions between these two is almost non-existent. Body and mind, not separate, or not same also. Now, this brings an issue. There are Buddhists who say, oh, all those Buddhists, all the sutras that you are talking, they are not real sutras. They are not taught by the Buddha. What are you talking about? This is what they would say. We can have another discussion about this another time. But here, for today, what is necessary to analyze whether there is Buddhism without reincarnation, I need to present the idea of direct teaching and the expedient meaning teaching. I don't know, I could be wrong, please correct. Apart from maybe Indian way of talking and Buddhist especially, I find that most of the Western or modern presentation on science or technology or politics, it's usually a direct ngedun teachings, isn't it? It's a ngedun, it's a direct teaching. You have to take literally. Buddha's teaching is not that easy to sort of put it in a black and white like this. Yes. To put it very crude, all Buddha's teaching, almost many Buddha's teachings are half true and half not true. Crudely speaking, he's kind of half lying and half not lying. And you will ask why? Because, and this we declare proudly in Tibetan, we call it Chemba Jumsindu Chene Chwe Mishe. Buddha never taught anything because he wanted to exhibit his knowledge. All Buddha's teaching is because of his compassion. If a Buddha look at a Californian who is suffering with a low self-esteem, he will say, yeah, you are a very good man. You are the center of the world, all of this. He could say this. But he also knows very well that this method is going to, in 30 years, turn whole California into a state of narcissist. And this system of Dangdan and Ngedun, we call it, delivering the truth directly and delivering the truth indirectly. This exists with the Buddha's teaching all the time. And I will single out those Buddhists who say, all the earlier sutras that they said, oh, your sutra does not exist. Those are not necessarily Buddha's word. I will have to say, they have to think twice. Because in their own sutras, Buddha at times praised generosity so much. But in their own sutra, some other sutra, Buddha is very cynical about generosity because he wants to sell the discipline. He wants to sell patience, other good things. So he said, don't get distracted with the generosity, so on and so forth. This is another reason why again, a Buddhist can talk about emptiness wholeheartedly and the ritual does not contradict. I have to thank Professor Shaft here because 2 times we had dinner and he talked about ritual in Buddhism and how this is, people talk about sort of Buddhism without the religiosity. And this really made me think. These Buddhists, what the hell? British Buddhist. The tendency, what they do is they cherry pick. Oh, meditation, wow, that's good. Let's pick this up. Fire puja, that's a Tibetan stuff. Not good, because you are underestimating relative truth. Maybe I'm being very narrow-minded looks like many of the other religions, including Abrahamic religion, seems to need to adjust to the present day of thinking and present day values. But I will have to say, Buddhism, ground, path, method, nothing needs to be modified, nothing. There is a path for everyone. That does not mean that others' method is invalid. So hot, let's take a break. So, reincarnation is taught in the sutras that are considered teachings of expedient meaning. So, on the absolute level, Buddhists don't believe in reincarnation. But even as I say this, I worry how you interpret this. And I will bring this up because I may be totally wrong. Because many people have made comment that the great Zen master Thich Nhat Hanh does not talk about reincarnation. And therefore, many of his followers, and I think most of them are what I called earlier, remember, sort of materialistic residual, Abrahamic residual students, they really they have now backup from an authentic Zen master. So this is how I tend to hear. I could be wrong, I have to say this. Not as a tulku, but as a Buddhist, I worried when I hear this. Because the whole point of practicing Buddha Dharma is to be free from cyclic existence, samsara, going round and round and round. If there is no reincarnation, there is no round and round. There is this, then that. And this makes sense in a way because many of so-called meditation, mindfulness, and so on and so forth works so well with resorts. Resorts, 5-star resort, massage, mindfulness, because afterwards, nothing to worry. You become a plant, you become part of the universe. Then, right now, you get a massage, you get a jacuzzi, and a meditation. That's why meditation is becoming popular. This is my fantasy. Again, I have to say this before I forget, because otherwise I'll forget. I will. Again, the moment we mention the words like samsara, because it's a foreign language, then you think in terms of long, infinite, I don't know. And this is where all this misconception happens. Yes. In the Prajnaparamita Sutra, Buddha told one bodhisattva that from the time he took bodhisattva vow to the time he was the 10th Bhumi bodhisattva, by the way, and it's like, and he was actually towards the last stage, and that's like 3 countless eons. Okay, be careful with the 3 countless eons when you hear this. Because the bodhisattva, I think, was complaining to Buddha, like, it's just so long and just so, And Buddha said that from the time he took the bodhisattva vow till the last moment of the bodhisattva, 10th Bhumi bodhisattva, it was shorter than a spark from the fire coming out and died. It was even shorter than that. That's what Buddha said. So when we talk about a samsara, we are talking about a tripping, basically. Tripping, which you should know, being here. And within this tripping sphere, reincarnation fits. Yeah. So, the concept of reincarnation should not be, like narrowed down to you die as a human being and born as a butterfly. This very, very mediocre, very small way of understanding reincarnation. But, there are teachings like that taught by the Buddha. Remember why? Half truth, half not truth. Because not everybody can understand. I'm repeating this a little bit, but you may ask, why does Buddha do this? Why does he lie? He doesn't want you to suffer, remember? Out of compassion. So he wants to take you from here to there, sort of. Okay, going back to Thich Nhat Hanh. Then, with a worry, I have read, with the help of a lot of people, I have read some of his comments. And even I highlighted. I can show you if you want. Of course, I'm not comparing myself to, he's a great master, but basically what he is saying is what I'm saying. In the ultimate level, we don't talk about reincarnation. Reincarnation does not exist as a truly existing entity. No. You cannot cherry pick this now, okay? Chö thamje milam da bujuma da bu nyang ni de bi chö chang milam da bujuma da bu nyang ni de ba la bi chö milam da bujuma da bu. All phenomena are like a dream and like illusion. Reincarnation, of course. Enlightenment, nirvana, is also like a dream and like an illusion. If there is something mightier than the enlightenment, that is also dream and illusion. This is spoken by the Buddha. But yes, in sutras like Jatakamala Sutra, where Buddha said, once upon a time when I was a monkey, as if there was a soul, mind that reincarnates and previous incarnation. Okay, I have to sort of rephrase this a little bit. These sutras, are they talking about the truth? No. But if you ask me, are they lying? I have to think about this. Because they are expedient meaning teaching. Okay, this is just what makes an expedient meaning teaching qualified as an expedient meaning teaching. This is important to actually sort of make note. Expedient teaching must lead to the ultimate truth, otherwise expedient teaching is not good. If expedient teaching is not leading to the direct meaning, then that teaching is not a path. When Buddha said, all compounded things are impermanent, that's an expedient meaning teaching, that's not absolute teaching. To be very crude, just to enhance, just to highlight, that's a lie. That's not a, maybe I shouldn't say lie, but just so that we can communicate. When he says all compounded things are impermanent, that is a relative teaching, not absolute teaching. I think for the materialist, it is actually the ultimate teaching. What is the problem? What is the problem? Why this is not the ultimate teaching? Because if it is ultimate teaching, Buddha is asserting that there is something that is becoming impermanent, danger. And Buddha is also, by consequences, he's saying impermanence is permanence. This expedient and direct meaning teaching is, as I said, I have no interest in having a dialogue with the scientists. I'm talking about here, just giving an opinion of how to study Buddhism. You have to, really think in this way in order to study Buddhism. If you don't understand some of these systems, you will not understand Buddha Dharma, even intellectually, very difficult. Sometimes Buddha said, those who see me as a form, those who hear me as a sound, they have a wrong view. This is what Buddha said. Other times he said, Buddha is adorned with the 32 major marks, 80 minor marks. So what is this? And sometimes, Buddha never said that there is a nirvana that requires abandoning of samsara. Non-existence of the samsara itself is the nirvana. This is what Buddha said. But other times, Buddha talked about the Sukarvati, the land of Amitabha, the swan, the pond, the flowers. He talks like this. And as someone like me, fanatical Buddhist, we are very proud he taught like that. Great teacher. That's why people like me, venerate him, because he talks like this. Anyway, the reason why I'm going on and on about this, I have a purpose, because I want to now address to British Buddhists again. Because in some of these books and articles I have read, one that is quoted quite a lot is, there was a time when Buddha was asked 14 different questions. Buddha didn't answer. Okay, so that has been used by the materialist, Abrahamic residual people as a proof. See, Buddha did not talk about reincarnation, because when Buddha was asked, whether the world has beginning or end, Buddha didn't say anything. There's a lot of fault in this, because first of all, if you want to study Buddhism, you should really read at least few different sutras, not just one. Because, remember, because Buddha said a lot of different things. You cannot cherry pick. And then also, the understanding, now this one I cannot blame them, of course, but I think the understanding of this, which the traditional Buddhist students like me, we rely on commentator like Nagarjuna. In the traditional Buddhist story, we hear that after Buddha got enlightened, he said, I found a truth that just cannot be talked, cannot be conceived, cannot be discussed. Therefore, I'm going to keep quiet, right? I'm putting it very loosely. So the story goes like Indra, requested him, and then he taught first teaching Saranath. That's the general story. That's interpretation. Other interpretation exists. That, what he said is already the teaching. If you can't hear it, if you can't listen to this, too bad, you are not qualified. But what he said, I have found the truth, brilliant, profound, anyway, there's some character. But, no one would hear this. I'm going to keep quiet. That in itself is the teaching of the most highest level. Likewise, one can interpret Buddha's silence to the 14 questions is the teaching. This question comes from Tirthikas, sort of philosophic group of people who basically is a trick question. They wanted to trick him, whether the world has beginning or not. Either way, the one who is asking the question wants to establish that there is a self. Either way, however Buddha answered, it's a mistaken answer. The best answer is quiet. Because the same question has been asked in other sutras, and Buddha gave many different answers, many. So, the fact that Buddha did not answer the 14 different questions is yet again a big support to asserting that reincarnation exists on a relative level. Let me explain this a little bit more. Again and again, reincarnation, cause and effect, all these teachings of the Buddha, he taught, not because that's how it is in the ultimate truth. Remember, always this. Okay, now this is probably another way, this is another difficulty with studying Buddhism. Because when you study Buddhism, you have to almost study within the framework of relative truth and ultimate truth. This is very, very sort of classic Indian way of talking. Okay, talking about the relative truth and ultimate truth. Big challenge, this one. Okay, just give you one example. Actually, there's many difficulties. Difficulty one is this. When we talk about relative truth, okay, this is what you want to talk about, relative truth. Unconsciously, you bring the ultimate analytical method. This is problem number one. On the other hand, when we talk about the ultimate truth, not being able to let go the relative truth, the habit of the relative truth. Problem number two. And always forget, we always forget that relative truth and ultimate truth are both within the relative truth. This will be problem number three. The next one is the biggest problem. The fourth problem is the biggest problem. Every time we talk about the true truth, we forget that they are in union. It's really difficult because, you know, the dualistic habit which shapes your intellectual mind just will not do this, it won't manage to sort of slice and cut these things. It's difficult. And besides, there are so many valuable things also in our life that we value, like morality. Wow, that's very valuable. You know, you don't want to bring ultimate truth, analytical mind into this too much. Sorry? Analytical system of ultimate truth, you don't want to bring into morality too much, because then morality, you know, crumbles. Shunyata, in its absolute, you know, the full level in America, you know, right now, if you teach, you will be categorized into criminal. In America, ethics, morality are so important. Pluralism, justice, so important. Freedom of speech, so important. Those are valuable, you know, so valuable. You know what? Innocent until proven guilty. Wow, so important, these things. And not only the, you know, general Americans or general mundane people, but also Buddhists. Buddhists also have a lot of valuable things. Discipline, very important. Cause and effect, so important, isn't it? No, that one, you know, you don't want to touch. But as I'm saying, if you use the analytical method to understand the ultimate truth to the cause and effect logic crumbles. And within this section, reincarnation. You talk about reincarnation, you know, like, you know, for the Tibetans especially, reincarnation is, and the Buddhists, you know, like traditional Buddhists, reincarnation is so important. That's why, you know, some people are becoming, you know, making a big hoo-ha about, you know, like reincarnation. So, this is why to study Buddhism, you know, you have to study the framework, how they study the, you know, the nature of the phenomena. sort of the Buddhist framework, and one of the most important framework is relative truth and ultimate truth. And I want to talk a little bit about these two truths, especially relative truth. And I want to use an old text. I will just quote a few. And the reason why I want to do this is because some of you may think, oh, you know, some of this sounds very modern. It's actually maybe he made it up. No, I didn't make it up. This is a text, and I had to do this. Instead of, you know, again, if I brought a text from, you know, Nagarjuna or Chandrakirti, of course you would think, oh, this is those classic Buddhist, whatever, you know, philosopher. But I didn't. This is a text discovered as a treasure teaching by a treasure discoverer. So I'm, you know, sort of bringing completely non-academic, non-intellectual person called Trengpo Terchen Sherpa, who is like the guru of Jigme Lingpa. I'm going to quote him. Okay? In the absolute level, there is no such thing as relative truth and ultimate truth. But since you say you are suffering, and I guess you are suffering, and looks like you want to get out of suffering, and you are asking me how to do that, I have no choice but to tell you, you should understand truth. Even as I say this, I don't believe. There is a truly existing truth. So, since you look like a dim-wit, is it? Dim-wit. I realize that I have to sort of talk about relative truth and ultimate truth kind of categorization. Because you are a dim-wit, and I feel for you. So there's something called a relative truth, which is false, not ultimate, not the real, you know, not absolute, you know, faulty. Zumba, lua, so. Zumba, you know, lie, lua, deceptive. And then there's the ultimate truth, which is, okay, first the relative truth. So, again, to define what is relative truth, and I think this is so really good. Four categories, four elements of definition. What makes a relative truth? Okay, in hierarchy, the first one being probably the least important, the last one being the most important. First one, consensus. That decides what's the relative truth. Okay, before I jump into this, he also divides the relative truth to two, valid and invalid. And we are talking about valid relative truth. Second element is that phenomena, do you know how to say this? Like can perform, can be useful?
It affects karmic consequences.
It affects consequences. Sort of, it has the, you know, like a coffee machine that it, you know, like the glass. It has a purpose. It serves a purpose. It is usable. That's one. Third one, pay attention. So important. Anything that is within the sphere of a cause, condition, and effect, it's relative truth. This is important, you need to know to study Buddhism. Materialist, I don't think for them it is the ultimate here. And the fourth one, this one, why not? I'm talking to Mr. Gombrich. Gombrich, doesn't matter. Because I talked with Gombrich hours and hours and hours. And he proudly, you know, we were arguing, and he was proudly talking about Karl Popper, right? Karl Popper. the theory of falsifiability, right? Falsifiable. And here I have to say this very loudly to the British. Long before Karl Popper, falsifiability is the fourth, the most important element of the relative truth. Right? Anything that you can falsify, basically, by analyzing, by hammer, whatever. You understand? Anything that you can analyze and prove this is not the real, this is not the real McCoy, right? This is not the real thing. That is relative truth. Okay? Going back to reincarnation, fits with this, valid relative truth. Consensus, cause and condition, what was it?
Purpose.
Purpose, yes. Yeah, we will talk about that purpose later. I know you have a little bit of a problem with that one. I will talk about this later, after food, I think. Actually, yes. See, I can say after the food we can talk. Do these people believe in continuity as a relative truth? I know continuity is falsifiability and falsifiable. Because if our materialist, Abrahamic residual Buddhists are saying that continuity is invalid, you have to be careful, because if this kind of concept comes, you can never ever lock a murderer into a prison. Because at 1 o'clock he commits the murder, 2 o'clock judge is still reading the court case, 3 o'clock, he's a different being. It's a different being. Of course, I'm not saying that just because it is usable, it is ultimate truth. I'm not saying that. Okay, I think I'm becoming a little bit fanatical here, so I should stop. Have a lunch.
我们吃中饭
1:30, right?
1:30
And I will try to leave some questions and answers later. I'm sure you are burning to, like...
那么就会给一点时间给大家问问题，他知道大家一定充满了问题。